2023年8月，亚历克斯·科利尔接受 UP 主丹尼·亨德森的访谈，讨论了各种话题，包括早期纽约州维斯切斯特县儿童的失踪、人类被爬行动物吞噬的地下设施的存在、人类被当权者对待的黑暗现实，还探讨了人类多维灵魂的概念、人口贩卖问题以及创造转变能量的必要性。对话最后呼吁老一辈采取行动，支持并为后代充分发挥潜力扫清道路。在第一部分披露他通过仙女座人全息相机所看到的黑暗信息。当然，我认为亚历克斯更多是为了实施震撼教育，让人类明白我们该怎么做。请系好安全带，让我们一起来看看。
Hi there, I'm Danny Henderson. Welcome to my Rumble channel. This is the great Alex Collier, and he has some information to share with you that he's never shared publicly before. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Danny. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to caution you, there's going to be some very graphic information here. This is information that I've had and I've sat with in my head and my heart for all these years. I touched upon it in an interview that I did in 1994. That interview sat in a drawer for 5 or 6 years until it was pulled out and it was entered into a film festival at one of the UFO congresses. And that's the first time it ever came out. And of course it's still out there. And I don't know if anybody remembers it or if you haven't seen it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the information in that video and what I was shown. Now, what led up to that is that there were a lot of children disappearing from Westchester County in New York. And some of the kids that we went to school with, that I went to school with, their siblings or their older brothers or sisters were had disappeared. This was also happening at other high schools that we played sports against. So it just organically kind of came together where we started putting up posters. We would go from New Rochelle, New York, to Larchmont, to Mamaroneck, to Portchester, White Plains, all the way up into Old Greenwich, Connecticut, and then into Stamford. And then we went up and down the Hudson River to some of the smaller communities, and we were putting up posters of the missing kids in liquor stores, grocery stores, convenience stores, gas stations, anywhere that we could. And most people were completely open to it. They're like, sure, absolutely. And I've shared that when I started talking about this, it was interesting. No one knew me from a bar of soap. And yet there were people after some of the talks that identified themselves as state police, retired FBI, retired CIA, and they encouraged me to keep talking about this. And I tried to, but it's so dark. It's just so dark. And now the information is coming out. It's now with the Sound of Freedom and the work that Mel Gibson's doing, and many others who have done this work, Kathy O'Brien and many other people who have talked about this thing and the people involved, Epstein Island, all of that, Hollywood, Disney. Now that it's out in the open, I'm going to share this information, what the A's showed me about specific things that they showed me that were going on underground. Just bear with me. This is not easy. I did not know the term adrenochrome at the time. I didn't learn about that till many, many years later. And I understand that there are people within the exopolitics community who are like, there's no such thing as regressives and all of that. And I'm not here to judge anybody else's work. What I'm here to do is to share with you the information that I was given by Mornay and Faceas, both of them at the time. And when I asked to see what was going on, they showed me. Now they have their camera, the holographic camera, which I've shared many, many years with you all. And what they do is they can take a picture of anything living, and it shows the entire history. So they have the entire history of the earth, all of it. And they showed me slices, as usual, like I've shared with you in the past, about this specific topic about the kids. And it wasn't always just kids. At times it was adults as well. And in the 94 video, I shared with you that we were food, that they were consuming humanity, and that they preferred children because they weren't spoiled or they weren't poisoned, and their bodies were very vibrant because they were young. They would take these kids underground and they would torture them. They would absolutely freak them out, scare them to death, and they would scare them over long periods of time to the point where they would not allow them to sleep. And if they had passed out, they would wake them up and they would continue to torture. They would bring them literally to moments of death where their hearts were just going to explode and stop. And it would be at that particular point that they would consume them. And they would start with their liver and their organs from here down. That's where they would start. And it would be like a feeding frenzy. You could see them. They would change their disposition and their composure. The reptilians now would change while they were consuming the kids, their organs. Now, the children were alive as they were being consumed. And at some point, they stopped. But they would consume this part of the body to the waist. And then the bodies would be dragged off to someplace else.
在第二部分，他讨论了负面人类和外星实体对人类的古老折磨和消费实践，还深入探讨了人口贩运贸易以及将人口作为货币的使用。
Now, when we go to Dulce, and I'm going to bring Dulce into this, there were vats, big vats of what looked like blood that had body parts in it. And what the Tao, which we call the Greys, which Elena's people referred to as the Nabu, they would put their hand in these vats and they would take the fluid and they would put it on their arms and their bodies, and then their bodies would absorb the fluid. And this is blood. This was human blood of people who had been tortured and chopped up, etc. And from what I understand from talking about people who had scientists who were actually pulled out of there, and from military people that survived, the Gray's disposition would change as well. In other words, our fear, the fear that humans were put through, is actually a narcotic, a drug for these extraterrestrials. Now, there have been several movies, V being one of them, where they talk about consuming humans. But, in that particular series, they would it would almost be like we're a roast, and they would roast us and then put us on a table and do that. And then, and they would take this syrup or whatever it is on these bodies, and they would have these lavish parties, again, doing this. This consumption of humanity has gone back thousands of years, but it was never done in front of humanity. It was always done in secret, because we had to be unsuspecting in order for them to farm us. And that's basically what they were doing. Many of the reptilian races, especially those underground, were farming us. Now, the torture of young people and children. The way that it was done is if they had siblings, they would torture one and bring them to the point of death and then stop the torture. And then they would work on this other sibling and they would torture them to the point of near death, arousing the first victim. So they would go back and forth. And they would do this with, especially with siblings, because they knew there was an emotional connection. They knew there was a spiritual connection between the two siblings. And they would do this back and forth to get the children to a very specific point. And then they would consume both of them at the same time. And again, they would work on the organs from here down, okay, to the waist, to the reproductive organs. That's what they would do. And they would consume those while the children were still alive, after getting them back and forth to this point. Some of these torture sessions would last hours. Some were very, very short. I don't know how the reptilians knew how far they could push some of these kids, but somehow they knew. Obviously, they're very, very experienced with this, and this is not something that was new to Earth. This is something that the reptilian nations or civilizations, not all of them, but the ones that were here, that were particular to the Orion system, they had a long history of knowing how to do this. And this was brought to Earth. These techniques were brought to Earth. And how I think the elite of this world, this was shared with them by the extraterrestrials, because it was a way to know how to control the elite, how to addict them to this process, and to give them longer lifespans, and to make sure that they would comply with whatever the rules and regs were going to be, whatever it was that they were going to do with humanity, whatever processes they wanted to use us for. That was something that this was a way to bring in control. And at the same time, humanity, because of the nature of our bloodlines and the fact that we have this compendium of all these different bloodlines, when they started exporting human trafficking us off world, they knew specifically which races, which groups would be very, very interested. And we were used as a currency. We were being used as a currency for technology and for other needs that these pirates, these groups had. This underground economy. I don't know what else to call it, but we were used as a currency. And I'm not just talking about Mars and Saturn or any of the moons of Saturn, or etc. You know, it's interesting. The dark side, the regressives, they always went around Jupiter and Ganymede. They always went around it. They never messed with that space. They always went around it. They always avoided it. Saturn was a different story. And I can't speak for Neptune or Uranus and beyond that. But they always gave Jupiter and Ganymede a wide berth for whatever the reasons. When I hear the stories about what they were finding in the tunnels, and ladies and gentlemen, my understanding is that they're still working the tunnels. And from what I also understand is that the inner earth beings, those races in the inner earth, they're also on board now, and they are approaching the tunnels from the inside out, because this is not something we could do on our own. This was way in over our head, not only technologically, but because we don't know the tunneling systems. And we don't know where the traps are because we don't have the experience. We're not an underground species. We're not Hyperborean. But these other races have experience with this. Not only that, but we were the being involved in wars on the surface and seeing the carnage of war. You would think that it would help prepare us for what we would see in the tunnels, but it didn't. It didn't. Especially when you get into some of these very deep underground caverns and you come across a farm where human beings were being grown who have never seen sunlight. Some didn't even have eyes because they didn't need them. Some who didn't know how to speak. But nonetheless, they were being farmed for their fluids, strictly for their fluids and their organs. And there was this huge process of, on these farms, humanity was plugged in to devices. And this is how they were getting their bodily fluids in order for their bodies to grow. But at the same time, there were these other devices attached to them that would torture the physical body. I mean, the shit's so dark. It's just so dark. And for any one of us that's normal, you simply cannot wrap your head around how anyone could do this. And when you realize that there are those from the surface who were down there participating in this process for power, for control, for wealth, for the fluids themselves, and however long they were in there for these, to participate in these processes, to then go back to the surface and reintegrate with humanity, with their own families. You just don't know how they can do this. How do you just turn yourselves on and off to this, unless you're either a complete split personality or multiple personality or psychopaths? And sadly, it's a combination of all of it. Because if you look at the world and the decisions that the elite have been making about choosing to eliminate, to genocide humanity, except for those chosen specific races or bloodlines. And now that they have the ability to clone people quite regularly, I mean, they can process a full-grown clone, I think, in less than 8 months now, that can live months. I think the newest clones can go 8-9 months, maybe almost a year, and they can do exactly the same processes to these beings.
在第3部分介绍了阿努纳奇创造克隆人类和人类独特的地方，探讨了人类拥有多个多维灵魂的概念，以及负面实体利用它的潜力，为什么多维力量进行干预和背后的原因，以及即将到来的重置。亚历克斯强调了理解我们的本质和我们所属的灵魂大家庭的重要性，还挑战了强加在我们身上的限制和误解，并强调了集体变革的力量。他最后敦促个人拥抱即将到来的变化，并相信进化之旅。
Now, when the Anunnaki created Homo sapiens sapien, and I don't know that Elena has talked about this. I watched her last Q&A. and maybe she just didn't want to go there. But the Anunnaki were very surprised that soul was attaching to the Homo sapiens sapiens. They were surprised that soul was attaching because cloning has been around a very long time. And you can program clones to do just about anything. However, they don't all have soul. We have many people on the surface of the planet that are clones that don't have soul. And you can always tell because they only have an aura around their shoulders. Here, that's it. There is no full auric field around the body because there is no soul in it. And I know that there's controversy around this issue. They say anything living has soul. That simply is not what I've been told accurate. So, but they were surprised that soul was attaching to Homo sapiens sapien. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact of the many different genetics that make up who we are. This was extremely intriguing because of the extreme of emotions that we have. And it's that extreme of emotions that not only gives us our strength, it not only gives us our endurance, it not only gives us our compassion, but it also creates a field of emotion and chemicals within our bodies and our brains that they hadn't quite found anywhere else out there, which has made us so unique. And because our physical bodies can hold souls from multiple dimensions, when we attach to the physical body, we leave an imprint, okay, a holographic imprint on the blood, on the DNA. This made us extremely valuable, especially when it comes to the blood, to the organs, to those dark things that the regressive groups were after. It also made us very unique in transhumanism and trying to make us multidimensional on a physical level. Man, I just don't know how to talk about this stuff. We are a race that is genetic royalty, and the limits to what we can accomplish, in other words, there may not be any limitations to what it is we can accomplish physically, spiritually, genetically, because we're so different. And if you were going to create a warrior class, if you were going to create a breed that could infiltrate multiple dimensions physically, we'd be it. We would be it, especially when you have multidimensional souls coming into our physicality. If you could capture those souls in a matrix mind, a mind matrix, then essentially what you've done is you've not only captured the soul in a mind matrix, but you've captured a soul group, because we're all connected. We're all connected. That means you would capture it. And just like you have remote viewers here, you could use these same beings that are captured in this mind matrix to remote view their soul groups and know what they're doing. You see, this is why intervention had to occur. Because what it did was, there's the universe always goes through resets where things are upgraded, okay? And things that no longer work go away. Okay? This is how the universe learns. This is how source learns, is by a process of experiencing. It's obviously using us and we it to on this journey of self-discovery. Well, when the resets come, things go away. Well, the regressives clearly were in fear, and what they wanted to do was make sure that they would survive by capturing this group that was connected to all things. Now, we have, and I've talked about this, and so have others over the years, we have souls here from 3rd to 11th density. Some say 12. I don't know about that, but I can confirm 11 that are here having this experience, this physical experience. If you could capture them, well, then you could literally hold everyone for ransom. You would have leverage over all these soul groups going through the dimensions. That's how twisted this thing has gotten and has become. And that's why the intervention is 4th, 5th, 6th, and now I understand 7th and 8th dimensions. Could even be higher. Source itself may also be involved, which would only make sense. And then we have 12th dimension, these beings who no one has seen before. You have the angelic realm, which directly is associated with Source itself, herself, now infiltrating, coming down through the dimensional realms. I mean, when you understand what was going on, it makes sense. All these other loose pieces coming together, because there's some information in the exopolitics realm that we're getting from different sources and contactees that doesn't make any sense, because we don't know where the pieces all fit together and how they fit together. They're just out there, and you're like, wow, that's weird. That doesn't make any sense, or, that's outrageous, or how could that possibly be true? And yet at this point, you cannot discount anything, because we don't fully understand the big picture. We never have. We were the last ones that anybody wanted to know what the true story was. Because once we get the big picture consciously, we can change everything ourselves, because we're 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th density beings. We represent all of this. The minute we figure it out down here, we can shift everything and say, that's it, we're done. So that's why we were absolutely given the full court press in this matrix, this prison that we didn't know we were in. That's why we were given these religions. That's why we were giving all these limitations. That's why they messed with the DNA to give us a shorter lifespan, so we would have to go over and over and over again and never actually have time to figure it out, because we would die off before we could figure it out. And then you poison the food chain. Then you poison the air, the water supply. All of this was and now we have a reset coming. Sometime between now and 2030, we have a reset that's coming, which is freaking everybody out. And there's no way they can stop it. They're trying. They've been doing everything frantically, but the universe is doing a reset. And this is why it's so important that we catch up. This is why it's so important that we understand disclosure, that we've never been alone, that humanity, the heart of humanity, belongs to a much larger family that isn't just human, but it's life itself. All life itself. We're part of this creation of all that is. And on a soul level, we've all come from Source. We didn't come from extraterrestrial races. We were Source first. And then the space was created by Source. The physicality was created by Source and groups that work directly for Source. And then the souls came in to manifest and to create. I once asked Visayas about, and this was in the 90s, 80s or 90s, about dark energy. And his response was, well, that's just areas of the universe that haven't been magnetized by thought. So it's all thought. it's all consciousness, you know. That's all it ever is. It's just all a holograph. But what makes it real is our belief in it and the energy that we put into it. That's what makes it so solid. And that's why we've had the full court press here on the planet to convince us of our limitations, which aren't real at all. None of them are real, but they had to convince us that we were limited, you know, and then they had to disempower us because if we rebelled, we'd change everything, which is what we're in the process of doing now, is rebelling against this dark authority, this regressive authority, this structure, this matrix structure that they had us in. And we're not the only ones, you know, other star nations have been freed from this same matrix. But somehow we ended up being the caboose here. You know, the last car, the last planet. What we do individually, and then what we do together as a collective group of soul groups here, changes everything. And it's just what it is. This is the role we have. This is the role we're in. And whether anyone's in denial about it or not simply doesn't matter. You're going to evolve, or you're going to start over somewhere else. Because the reset's coming, you know, and what that looks like is anybody's guess. But the thing about change is that you either embrace it, and in embracing it, you trust and you become vulnerable to go where the currency takes you, the current of frequency takes you. Or you oppose it, and the change happens without you. Now, we have been conditioned to be afraid of change. Again, that's a program that was done to trap us, to keep us stuck. Danny, I don't know where you want to go with this now. I have no idea.
在第4部分谈论越南战争以及世界其他盗窃尸体的生物的存在，亚历克斯跟随主播的画风，强调了这些吃肉的黑暗实体已经不存在，安抚人群。他说，现在参与者是负面人类，但是他们已经不是人类，半人半爬虫人，必须被移除。
I didn't want to interrupt, of course, and just let you go because, as you say, you've been holding all of this in for so many years, you know, and you're so beloved, and there are so many that come to you for your knowledge, you know, and so I am just in awe that you can speak to the things you speak to, that you explain it so beautifully. It's easy to understand from your perspective the way that you've laid it out, but understandably you've been holding it for so long. I think
you know that in war that wherever there's been war, there have been sightings. And you also know that soldiers and casualties, some dead, some barely alive, those bodies were taken, okay, by not us. In Vietnam, there were things living in those jungles that were not us. They were not us. And the locals would tell our military, you know, don't go in there. But of course, if we were given orders, we had to go into some of these areas. And things happened. Things happened that to our military, you know, MIA, you know, there's a lot more to that. And the military has not been forthcoming with those things that have happened in war, in the Pacific. There were other things as well that were going on there by things living in those jungles that were not us. They were not the Japanese. Parts of Europe, there were things in the Black Forest and other areas that were not us, that would come up from underground. They would take the bodies and they would be gone. So, you know, we so we so need we so need to be told the truth. And I believe that, well, the Q post says that not everyone could be told the truth because 99% of the world's population would have to be hospitalized.
Mm.
I think that's probably true. At least at that point, it was true. Um, I would hope that at least 10% of us could handle the truth.
Mm.
Um,
I think it's higher now. I do. I
I
remember,
would hope so.
yeah, I remember years ago when I heard pretty much a lot of what you're saying. I literally was in bed for 3 days. I couldn't move. I couldn't function. I've been through my own trauma, as many humans have, and also as a therapist and work with trauma people, trauma patients. But even with all that training, I couldn't cope with. And then I realized, well, I have to get up. We have a job to do. We have a mission. And I feel like even since then, for me, that most thinking humans who are starting to question have been exposed to some kind of documentary or a rumor, or TikTok has gone mad with, conspiracy. I mean, whatever it's called. But this drip, drip, drop, drop, drip, drip, drop, drop coming in all the time into our consciousness. So I think that the humans have been really primed for the horrors that you're speaking to on a much, much broader level. And the fact is they need to and have needed to. We do need to make the point. The reptilians, the Cicad draconians, you need to give us the names, please, and advise humanity that these regressives are no longer here doing that in the way that they were. We don't want to put people into more fear by you sharing this. This is what was happening. So I'll just turn over to you for you to share what
Okay.
feels right.
Well, that's why I said intervention had to happen. Yeah, uh, well, the CCAR, other reptilian underling groups that they had working for them. You had the Tao. You also had some human groups or half human groups, half human, half reptilian. Uh, there was an element of the Anunnaki that was very, very dark. They did the dirty work, you know, not necessarily for Enki, but uh, for others.
Did you mean to say that?
They didn't work for Enki. No,
Right.
that was not his gig. He created life. That was not his gig. That was not his gig. He didn't start wars. That was his brother's. That was his brother's gig. You know, it's you have the warrior and then you have the doctor. You know, that's the best way to describe who they were as persons. You know, um, but that's kind of Elena's lane. She has a lot more information about that than I do. And Dr. Sala's work right now is bringing a lot of that up. And you know, to those of us who have been in this field for a long, long time or have been studying it, we're watching the disclosure and it's drip, drip, drip to us. But to people just waking up, it's like, wow, look at all this information. It's coming hard and fast.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't. It's not really, but it's something. It's something. And I know that there's a plan and how to do this, and they've worked this out, and they've gained this, and there have been multiple races off world and on the surface who are all on board with how to do this, to try to wake humanity up without traumatizing everybody. But there are going to be some startling revelations nonetheless. Now, this is not occurring anymore. What's happening with the human trafficking, sadly, is our own people now. It is humanity doing this to humanity. And these people that are doing this, who, whether they're doing the adrenochrome or not, if they're grabbing kids and taking them underground for the money, for the organ harvesting, they need to be removed from the equation. They cannot live with us any longer. They have to be removed. And end of story. Because they'll never stop. They will not stop, these people. Okay? They're not humans anymore. They walk and talk, but they're not humans anymore. They don't feel human. They don't think like a human. Everything's a product to them. They have to be removed from the equation.
这是亚历克斯·科里尔2002年退休前的最后一次 UFO 演讲。之前他从未出版过。他讲述了他的仙女座外星联络人向他提供的有关银河系历史的信息。该演讲也被称为地球秘密历史。吊诡的是，星际政治杂志主编于2008年1月2日在准备转录稿时，发现45分钟的演讲内容从 DVD 录音中神秘地消失了，遗漏了许多关于外星种族历史的重要信息。考虑到丢失材料的重要性，推测在丢失的45分钟内，受到批评的外星种族之一不希望这些材料被泄露。在第一部分，他讨论了银河系古老建造者种族的存在，外星生物通过工程改变行星轨道、环境和地形，以适应生命存在的过程。他强调这种命运工程在整个银河系中广泛存在。科里尔谈到了建造者种族的自我复制机器，它有能力创造分子、原子和物质。这些机器像计算机一样，根据需要进行编程，从虚空创造各种事物。让我们赶紧来看看。
好的，女士们、先生们，我叫亚历克斯·科利尔，我非常感谢你们的到来，这对我来说是非常特别的享受。我喜欢这种小而私密的场合，客厅之类的地方，我很自在。当我进入状态时，我喜欢说话。我现在绝对有心情畅谈。今天上午我分享的信息，我想再简要的讲一遍，因为我讲得太快了，而你们有些人又不在现场。基本上，我们要讨论的是22个外星种族。这本书将于今年春天出版，书名是《保卫圣地2》。我想写这本书已经有10年了，现在是时候了，因为太阳系中发生了太多的事情，我们都需要一张积分卡。我希望能够分享与我分享的知识，让我们了解这些生命是谁，以及他们与地球、与我们之间的具体关系。简而言之，我们是由许多不同种族组成的，确切地说，是22个种族。这是一个生理事实，地球上有22种不同的形体，这是外星种族的结果。我无法在2个小时内分享我的一切，因为我今晚要和麦克拉斯同台，但我会在你身边，随时为你提供信息。每隔几周，你查看网站，这些信息将被放到网站上。一旦完成校对和编辑，你们就会收到。届时会有装订成册的书籍，不过你们现在已经拥有这些信息了。如果届时您想购买赠送给朋友，也可以购买，不过网上都是免费的。我不想多说这一切是如何开始的。13年来，我一直在讲那个故事，但我拒绝再讲述那个故事了。如果你想知道，可以访问网站，所有信息都在那里，包括第1册，你可以免费下载。关于地球史，我们所学到的地球史非常肤浅。我们也被教导说我们是从一个单细胞进化而来的，基本上我们是一个意外。我们所有人都只是一个意外。一些非常奇怪但又神奇的事情发生在几只黑猩猩身上，然后我们就出现了。好吧，应该这么简单吗？事实上，我更喜欢真实版本，而不是捏造的版本。我将从地球上的一些历史时间线入手，通过特定的时间段来证明一个观点。这一点在书中会更加具体。好的，地球形成。我们将从45亿年前到5.54亿年前的前寒武纪开始。地球历史教学，地球和太阳系中的其他行星一起正在形成，地球正在诞生，生命正在觉醒，第一批构造板块正在开始移动，真菌、植物、动物和生物体正在发育，大气正在变得富含氧气。仙女座人的历史，一个被称为创始者的古老种族， 仙女座人和昴宿星人都认为他们是一个叫做帕塔尔的古老种族，正在进行一项工程计划。通过这项计划，他们正在进行行星环境和地形改造。他们这样做是为了使这些行星和恒星太阳系适合生物和生命居住，形成充满氢、氧、甲烷和氨的生态系统。好的，现在以一个生态系统为例，有的是氧气，有的是甲烷，有的是氨气，有的是氢气，这些都是气体，用于引入微生物、人形生物和各种生命形式。自我复制机器。彗星和行星的轰击改变了行星的自转和化学性质。关于自我复制机器，我们稍后再谈。